All right, part two. Um, I'm using what is this called? What is this called? X Live. I done forgot the name. And I bought this software too, and I done forgot the name of it. XSplit. So it still takes some getting used to, especially when it comes to the shortcut keys and actually getting my content to end when I want it to end, because I have a shortcut key combination that doesn't seem to work depending on where my mouse cursor is, and I have to figure that out. But anyway, I'm going on to part two. Our operating system WIM file is now copied over to our distribution point. So we have our task sequence, our boot image, and our WIM. They're all ready to go. And actually, the only reason that we're ready to go is because our boot image was already distributed. But make sure that your boot image is distributed to your distribution points. If you have remote locations, make sure that they replicate it over and everything like that as well as for your task sequence. In your task sequence, you can look at the references to see actually what's a part of that actual task sequence. If we had applications here, we would also be able to see the steps we would also be able to see the steps below and what configurations would take place during that particular event. So what we need now is a collection. With task sequences, like applications, like packages, like software updates, you have to actually deploy them to a collection, which allows for you to group machines together and be able to have them receive content based on that grouping. So what we're going to do is go to our overview, and we're going to go ahead and expand that, go into our OSD task sequence. This is a folder I created just for holding collections for task sequences. And this was a previous one, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new task sequence. And we're going to name this one TechJax OS. And we're going to limit this collection to all our systems so that we can query and add all machines as needed. And we're going to we're not going to add any machine because we don't have a machine yet. We're going to actually have to get the machine value and the machine information at a later time. And that's going to come up very shortly, because we actually have to create the task sequence. I mean, we actually have to create the virtual machine first, or you'll see. So we have our collection and we have our task sequence. So what we want to do is go ahead and deploy our actual task sequence to that collection so that any machines that are placed in that collection can pixie boot and actually start to install that actual task sequence. So in our OSD task sequence folder, we're going to go ahead and select the TechJax OS collection that I just created. And it doesn't contain any members. It lets us know that it doesn't have any members now. That's okay. We're going to leave the installation purposes available. And for this setting here, make available for the following, we want to set this to only media and for Pixie. The scheduling settings, you can just click next through. The user experience, you can just click next through. Alerts, distribution points. In certain scenarios, depending on your environment and how your boundaries are set up and whether or not you have a slow network, fast network, you can make some changes to this particular group of policies. But in this particular scenario, we're not going to do anything. We don't have any fallback distribution points, so it wouldn't be used in our particular environment. And we get a summary and we get our green check marks, and green means good. So we have a deployment now of this particular task sequence to our TechJax collection for deployments. So the only thing now that's keeping us from actually imaging a machine is actually having a machine and having that machine be in the collection. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and, excuse me, because I have to actually set my timer again, because I told you guys that I need to keep these videos slow and low, and you let me go, I'll go for forever. So I'm going to go ahead and create a virtual machine that we can actually import and pixie boot into. So with that, I'm going to go to our home in our VMware 9, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new virtual machine. And we're going to do a typical virtual machine install. And for our particular setting here, we're going to install the operating system later. We're going to designate that it's going to be a Microsoft Windows operating system, and we're going to allow it, select the version to be Windows 7 64-bit. And we're just going to name this like TechJax 7, right? Just because we want to make sure that everything that we're doing has the same naming convention so that we can easily track where we are in this progression. We're just going to leave all those settings right now the same, just 60 gigs. I have a lot of operating system virtual machines as it is, and it's already eating up a ton of my space, so I'm not going to go and give it any more than what it already needs. And it doesn't need that. I think Windows 7 needs like 20 gigs. So we're going to set the network adapter to bridge so that it can actually be on the same network where our DHCP server is, and they actually get an IP address so that when it boots into the Pixie server, it's able to actually get the content from and the boot image downloaded from our network share. And we're going to hit finished, and there we go. We have a system that's ready to be, I guess, booted into Windows PE. One of the settings I like to do is actually power on into BIOS so that we actually have an option to make sure that in case you miss it or you're not really quick, because there said press F2 to boot into BIOS or boot into the network. I like to go ahead and just set it here. And this way we can make sure that the first boot attempt is into the NIC. So as you can see, our device is trying to boot into the Pixie and trying to get that information from the SCCM server, but it can't reach it. The reason why it can't is because, well, number one, it's not imported into SCCM, the actual device. So what we're going to have to do is actually go ahead and go back to our SCCM server. And what we're going to do is open up our CM trace and open up a log called the SMS Pixie log. Now this particular log, and we didn't have to go into that log because what we're going to go into this log for is sometimes you can add by GUID, sometimes you can add, you need to add it by MAC address at least. The MAC address here, as you can see, is 000C29, yada, yada, yada. What we want to do is actually get that MAC address because we need to import that device into SCCM via the MAC address. The Pixie logs allow us to see what devices have tried to Pixie boot, and it'll actually give us the same information that we're seeking. You can also use, and you would use this when you're having issues with machines Pixie booting or imaging, because it can give you information about why that particular machine isn't allowed to boot into Pixie. In this particular scenario, it's saying that it has no advertisement. That's one of the reasons why it isn't booting, and that's because it's not in SCCM and it's not in the collection that's actually been advertised or TechJax task sequence. So that fits. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and copy this. I'm going to copy this to a quick notepad, and I'm going to take the MAC address. And there are much better ways to do this, especially if you have like a PowerShell script and you have machines that you got the MAC addresses for. You can do all these imports or via CBS or a PowerShell script at one time. You can do multiple machines at once, but we're just doing a single import. So under devices and the assets and compliance, what we do is go ahead and we click on import the computer information. And we're going to import a single computer. If we want to import by a file, then that's when we go ahead and choose that file. But we're going to import by a single computer. And we're going to name this particular computer, let's see, what can we name it? I don't know, Z. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and paste the MAC address here. So this machine, the computer name will be Z, and the MAC address associated with the machine is being imported into SCCM now. So what we're going to go ahead and do is click next a couple of times, and we're going to add this machine to the all systems collection. And that machine will show up there. There's the machine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our OSD task sequence, and we're going to go ahead and add a resource. And that resource that we add is going to be Z. So we're adding the Z computer into the TechJax OS collection that has the TechJax task sequence deployed to it. And to confirm that deployment, you can see that the deployments that are actually advertised to this particular collection is the TechJax demo task sequence. And it can take a couple of minutes for this to update, depending on your environment, network speed, and other factors that seem to change. I've been in environments where it took 20, 35 minutes. I've seen times where it took 2-3 minutes. I've seen times where it went instantly. Who knows why? But we're going to just go ahead and click on this a couple of times, hit refresh a couple of times. And then when it shows up, we'll go ahead and create a part 3, which is the actual Pixie booting, and then we'll go ahead and see the results of that particular Pixie boot. One thing that I do want to go over again real quick is the steps that we took so far. What we did was we imported the WIM file that we previously had, whether that's straight off a DVD ISO or whether or not it's from a sysprep machine. You capture the WIM file via the Windows PE if you're going to do that. And we put that content on our sources drive so that we can import it into SCCM. And we name it TechJax OS. Our boot image has the NIC drivers that we already need for our virtual machine to be able to Pixie boot, so that's fine. Your boot image also needs to be on a distribution point so that it can download that content when needed via the Pixie. And our task sequence was created, and it had a couple of slight configuration changes, nothing dynamic or anything like that, but just enough so that we can actually start the installation process. We created our collection, and we added a resource to our collection. I'm going to go ahead and click Update Membership, and we're going to go ahead and hit refresh again. And this is going to take a little bit. So what I'll do is go ahead and update this from the next steps in part 3 when this actually shows up in our actual collection. And then we'll go ahead and boot from there. All right.